Vital, our 12-month practitioner training program, is back for its third cohort starting January 2024. The last two cohorts have been nothing short of transformational, both personally and professionally, for everyone involved. And here's a little taste of what makes it so special. Vital is a process-oriented curriculum, focusing on multidisciplinary perspectives and wisdom traditions, guiding students through powerful inner work and building practical skills to support lifelong growth. Through lectures, study groups, elective modules, retreats, and process papers, you'll have all the support you need to develop your own vision and model for entering this exciting field. Applications for Vital are open until December the 20th, with early bird discounts available until November the 19th. We invite you to apply early to improve your chances of being accepted into this global community of the next generation of psychedelic wellness practitioners. So head to vitalpsychedelictraining.com to download our full course curriculum and learn more about this transformative journey.
Hey, it's Joe here, letting you know about 2 new classes coming up that Kyle and I are producing in person. So if you're in Miami or near Denver or willing to travel, check these out. So we've been teaching navigating psychedelics for a long time, and we decided to come up with a 2-day format where you still get all of the online training for navigating psychedelics, but you get 2 different 8-hour class days with us in person. So if you want to check out the Miami dates, it's October 7 and 8, and in Denver, November 10 and 11. For Denver, again, November 10 and 11. And that's going to be really fun. So check out our website, psychedelicstoday.com/events, if you want to learn more about those classes, and hope to see you in class.
Hello everyone, David Drapkin here, letting you know about a scheduling change for the second cohort of our 8-week live-taught online course, Psychedelic Neuroscience Demystified, How Psychedelics Alter Consciousness and Produce Therapeutic Effects. The course is now starting on November the 1st, so you've got more time to enroll. You can go to psychedeliceducationcenter.com for all the details, but in a brain-shaped nutshell, here are the basics. So once again, the course is being taught by Dr. Melanie Pincus and Dr. Manish Gom, and they've designed this course with a combination of live group classes and in-depth masterclass video lectures, making it accessible to both scientists and non-scientists by focusing on the real-world practical applications of cutting-edge research and therapeutic models. Throughout the course, you'll have the opportunity to connect with like-minded individuals from around the world and engage in meaningful discussions about this exciting emerging field. So, whether you're a mental health professional, researcher, or simply interested in expanding your personal and professional knowledge, this course is designed for anyone looking to have a deeper understanding of the neuroscience underlying psychedelic therapy. Classes start again November the 1st, and you can find out more information and enroll on psychedeliceducationcenter.com. Join us on a journey into the brain on psychedelics. Shalom, everybody. Welcome to a Psychedelics Today podcast with myself, David Drapkin, and Madison Margolin. We're having a conversation about the intersection of Jewish culture, consciousness, spirituality, and psychedelics. Beautiful intersection where I am loving dancing at the moment. So, yeah, thanks for indulging us in this episode. It was a bit weird to kind of give ourselves permission to kind of just talk in a Jewish way and use Jewish words even. So feel free to use Google Translate if you need to. With 2 main things we talk about, Madison and I. One is her book she is just releasing called Exile and Ecstasy, Growing Up with Ram Dass and Coming of Age in the Jewish Psychedelic Underground. It comes out on November 7th and it's by Hay House Press, but you can pre-order now. And much of what she's talking about there is growing up in a Hindu family, closely connected to Ram Dass, and how her use of psychedelics have really over the years helped her to come more deeply and beautifully in connection with her Jewish tradition, and how to express that and really be part of the underground, but also through her journalistic work, help to spread some new teachings in a sense around our identity unfolding. So beautiful to hear that piece. And then the second main thing that I'm just delighted around is Madison's one of our teachers in our new Navigating Psychedelics course which is called Jewish Informed Perspectives, starting October the 10th. And Madison will be teaching about the subject of setting sacred time and space, particularly the Sabbath, and just this concept of, transcending the immanent and the material, and being here now, which is a very Ramdas space to be in, obviously. So thanks for listening. Before we jump into it, I just want to remind everybody, if you haven't yet liked or subscribed to our podcast, go ahead and do it. Makes everyone's life easier. And you can do the same on social media because we are everywhere. And our main website to check out our podcast backlog, all of our articles, upcoming events, and to become a member of our Navigator community, psychedelicstoday.com. And if you want to check out that Jewish Informed course, it's on psychedeliceducationcenter.com, along with a whole host of other courses. Any feedback or questions, you can email us at info@psychedelicstoday.com. All right, my lovelies, enjoy the episode. Take care. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Psychedelics Today. This is David Drapkin and Madison Margolin in Israel. Not quite in person. We almost made it up north to Tzfat, but we opted instead for an online virtual recording. But it's still awesome to see you, Madison. How's it going?
Good, thank God. Yeah, I'm happy to be here and happy to be on the podcast.
Yeah, it's awesome having you here. And we've been getting friends over the last year or so and met up in New York and New Jersey. And it was great to see you last week in Zichron Yaakov in Israel. And how long have you been in Israel for now?
I guess a little bit, about 2 weeks now, approximately 2-3 weeks at this point.
Yeah.
I came right at the beginning of September in time for all the Jewish holidays and see how long I stay.
Yeah, I'm here for 4 weeks and it seems like forever. It's amazing how, and we're going to talk about that, like time and space, the relativity of it. It just feels different here, time and space. I would love you to have, just a first opportunity to introduce yourself to folks that are listening and watching, if you're okay, just to do that in whatever way feels authentic, Madison.
Sure. So I'm a journalist, originally from Los Angeles, and have lived in New York since about 2014, although from 2014 until now, I've also been very on and off living in Israel as well, first in Tel Aviv and then in Tzfat. It's been a little bit of a ride, being in all these different homes and kind of using that for my journalism. So primarily, I'm a journalist. I cover psychedelics and Judaism. I started out writing about cannabis, and I just wrote a book that's coming out in November called Exile Ecstasy, and it's about my experience growing up in the community surrounding Ram Dass and then finding my way through the psychedelic Jewish underground. And I also co-founded DoubleBlind Magazine and host a podcast on the Be Here Now network called Set and Setting, and co-founded the Jewish Psychedelic Summit, and also currently work as a contributing editor to Ayin Press, which is a sort of Jewish specific literary studio and publishing house. And they let me do a lot of Jewish psychedelic content. So happy with that.
Awesome. And I want to give us both permission to just kind of Jew it up in this episode. I'm always really reserved about, oh God, I'm getting too Jewish and talking too much about Jewish stuff. But just for once, let's give ourselves permission just to really be Jews and kind of just go with that flow wherever it leads us to.
Thank you for that, because I get self-conscious about it sometimes. Maybe it's my own internalized anti-Semitism. I forgot to say, I feel like maybe because I've been in more of a Jewish mode lately being in Israel, but I also write non-Jewish articles about psychedelics and cannabis and whatever. I've written for Rolling Stone and Vice and Playboy and, High Times, a lot of different publications. So I totally forgot to say that in my bio, but adding it here.
Yeah. I've loved reading your stuff over the years, and it was awesome when, we kind of became pals as well. And there's an amazing vibe happening around the Jewish psychedelic kind of intersection. And I want to say thank you just for joining us on our upcoming course, Navigating Psychedelics, Jewish Informed Perspective. So we've got a bunch of amazing teachers joining me over 9 weeks. And there were so many people that we couldn't squeeze in because there's only 7 teachers. But there's just so many amazing people that are that are specializing in this area or just sharing their experiences without too much pomp and ceremony. they're just kind of just doing it and walking the walk, which I'm just loving also being a part of that little chevra. So your class is going to be week 2 around setting, sacred time and space, particularly around, I think, Shabbat. And when we did an event at Psychedelic Assembly in Manhattan a couple of months ago, you were really talking about Shabbat there as this, as a vehicle, as a container. So before we jump into the book and kind of really expand that piece out, what is it around setting and, sacred time and space that really connects with you? And I know that's also what your podcast is called. Why does that resonate, do you think, particularly?
Yeah, I mean, I think set and setting applies to everything, right? For those in the audience who maybe aren't familiar with the term, your set is your internal state, your heart space, your mental space, emotional state, whatever, before going into a psychedelic trip. And then the setting are all of the surroundings that might influence it, who you're with, where you are, what time of day you're doing it, what music is playing, stuff like that. But I don't think set and setting has to only apply to doing a psychedelic trip. I think it really applies to life in general, right? Like, what are you bringing to a situation, and what's the situation bringing to you? And, I feel like the Jewish holidays are and the calendar in general is a very cool opportunity to sort of explore the different, I'm going to sound like such a hippie, but like energetic frequencies and stuff that are at play during certain times. And so each time is seen as sacred. Shabbat, the Sabbath, is seen as this like 25-hour rest period where it's almost like time out of time. It's timeless. When you're in Shabbos mode, as I sometimes call it, you're not even thinking about time. You're not thinking about like worldly matters of space, of material things. You're kind of like in a little bit more of a transcendent state if you're able to kind of tune into that, I would say. And so, one thing the point that I want to make is that how do I say it? It takes a degree of mental discipline and emotional discipline to sort of like tune into the emotional factor, the set of Shabbat and of the other holidays, so to know that it's Shabbos is one thing. You have the challah and it's the day of the week, and you see that the sky is dark, and so it's Shabbos now. But to feel it in your body, that's really the set. And so much of my work and exploration revolves around the embodiment of these kind of like spiritual opportunities, I'll say. So yeah, does that answer the question?
Yeah. And I think intentionality is just a massive part of set and setting. Yeah, and our reasons for using psychedelics. And I've been coming across this term, or trying to just, maybe I don't know if I made it up myself, but just radical intentionality, particularly from a harm reduction perspective. I was talking to Sean Lacob, another one of our teachers, about just radical intentionality and getting a sense of, the why am I here? And it's still okay, I think, just to use psychedelics for whatever reason we want to use them. Like, I'm not like the intentionality police here to say what's right and wrong and how intentional we all have to be. But yeah, there's something beautiful, isn't there, about like this invitation to connect with an intention, particularly now, like we just had Rosh Hashanah, we're coming into Yom Kippur, and our attentions are kind of, still malleable. How high do I want to aim for? Really what is important to me? And for me this year, in the year 5,784, I'm just setting some really basic intentions and goals. So I'm trying to reduce like how, spiritually austere and, elite I'm trying to be, and just really keep it super basic, simple stuff like being a husband and a father, and just simple kind of habits of my average day. But that is the kind of intentionality I need just to get more from life and to hold myself accountable, I think. So I don't know, how are you feeling around this year, if it's okay to ask? Like, we're in the 10 days, the Yamim Noraim, where are you holding around the malleability of your intentions and kind of moving into the new year?
Wow, yeah, I really it's a good question, and I have to give it a lot of thought, honestly. It does feel like a new era, like some years it's like, I feel like an era can be a couple years long, but I do feel like we're entering into a new phase of life. And a lot of people I've spoken to have said this too. And, my own life personally and I think where we are as a community and so forth. But as far as my intentions for the new year, I mean, I think it's really about integrating all of the work and the ethos of psychedelics that I've been exploring the past several years. I wrote almost 9 years ago, I started journalism school, and I got really involved with this whole psychedelic Jewish underground. And now I wrote the book. And the book is coming out in November officially. And I'm like, all right, what's next? Like, what's the next thing? And so I think part of my intentionality for the new year is like trying to move away from like hustle culture. As a freelance journalist, I've hustled my ass off, and I'm tired from it. And I want to sort of like, really just be able to like experience life in a way that is like that you can savor it and not feel like you're rushing from one thing to the next. And so I'm really holding that dear as I say, like, I'm moving into another chapter, a new book that I'll write eventually. And I want to be more intentional about, how I bring that to my relationships, to my family, to myself personally. And so seeing myself holistically rather than just as a journalist on a mission, but as a whole human being, and how am I developing my own midas or character traits.
Nice. And one big question I want us to just sit with, Madison, is around why Jewish people seem to be so enthused around drugs and getting high and experiencing non-ordinary states of consciousness. And they're very involved in the psychedelic renaissance right now, and in the first or second wave, in the 60s and 70s as well. And I'm sure we'll end up talking about the experiences of your dad, Bruce, as well, in the second wave. But why do you think Jewish people are drawn to drugs, psychedelics, non-ordinary states, and are playing such a kind of disproportionate role in the psychedelic renaissance?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few reasons. I've had this question asked to me also in the cannabis world, and the obvious answer for a lot of people has been, self-medicating, right? Like the prevalence of anxiety and, the way Jewish trauma manifests in our bodies and minds. People want to sort of heal from that. Now, I don't think it's conscious for a lot of people. I mean, I think it's becoming more conscious and they're articulating it in that way more and more, but I don't think that's the primary reason. I think there's another reason is that, the term Yisrael means to wrestle with God. And I think so much of the Jewish experience is this kind of, complicated relationship with the Creator and feeling, and we have so many different names for God in Judaism, depending on the way we're experiencing him or it or them or whatever, her, whatever you want to call it. And I think that's what it is to be Jewish, is to really like be seeking out this relationship. And even if you're an atheist, that's atheism is still in relationship to God, and that you dafka don't believe in God, but God is still part of the conversation in a way. So it's I think that's kind of funny and ironic. And so I think for Jews, is psychedelics offer us this opportunity to really dig into ourselves and be seekers in this way. And I find that there's a lot of spiritual journeying and impulse in the Jewish community, even if it's not being expressed Jewishly. For instance, I grew up in a community where people were going to India and exploring Buddhism and Hinduism, and but that's still like a very Jewish thing to kind of seek out God.
Yeah, were you ever a Hindu? I used to be a Jubu. Is that a stage of life you went through?
Never. I mean, I was raised by Hindus. Ram Dass, the ultimate Hindu, he won't be here now, is a good friend of my dad's. I would say I'm only Jewish on my parents' side. And so I grew up in that community, of Hindus. So I recently wrote an article about Ram Dass's Jewish legacy. And I said in the article, I'm only Hindu on my parents' side. So I grew up with it, but I've never identified as Hindu specifically.
Yeah, just really briefly, I was born Jewish, rejected it, ran away as quickly as I could. And I'm realizing just in the last few months, I was actually trying to like kill the Jew inside of me, almost like this internalized anti-Semitic piece. Like I was trying to, just be a normal person, a normal Englishman, blend in and not have to carry around like the burden of it. So I became Buddhist, and I was just a Buddhist for a while. And then slowly, 8 years later, became a Jew boo. And now I'm, the last 10, 15 years, I've just been a Jew again. So what was that? What was your equivalent journey as a Jewess? Like, did you have any periods of running away from it or fleeing from it, or like how did you wrestle with being you from a Jew's soul level?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, because I always really identified with my Judaism, and I think that's because my parents ran away from it in a way, and so I like my own rebellion was running toward it, and so when I was a kid, I was always really, I don't know, I was really into Holocaust literature. Like, I don't know why, but I was, would impersonate Anne Frank for like a living biography book report, and was just like really obsessed with like, do I look Jewish? Do I look Jewish enough to be targeted? Like I don't know, that I was like, do I have a Jewish nose? Like I had this whole like fear around anti-Semitism, like probably from reading these books, or maybe just a innate sort of like soul memory thing, or I don't know, whatever it is. And so that manifested in like not wanting to look super Jewish. Not that I ever did anything about it except straighten my hair here and there. But so that's one, I guess, form of, like kind of a complicated relationship with just like my genetic presentation. But no, I always, it's funny because I sort of ran away from the things that my parents showed me through their Hindu, way of life. They were into yoga and meditation and gurus and chanting. And so, yeah, I never really ran away from Judaism, but I think I did sort of reject a lot of the things that my parents were trying to teach me, or at least not even trying to teach me, but that's just they introduced me to through their community. And so my whole book is actually about, Ram Dass was a household name, my parents' kind of catch-all response to any issue I had was just be here now, and when you're being told, when the term "be here now" is being slightly abused, or the people who are telling you to be here now are creating a situation where you don't want to be here or now, it can be a little bit of a spiritual conundrum. And so I was very dissociative. Actually, I was in high school, I had a pretty bad eating disorder, and I really like tried to not be in my body at all, for whatever traumas and stuff. And I write about it all in my book. And so that was really like my wrestling, was like really wrestling with myself. And, when you are wrestling, even because you are a part of God, we're all sort of creations of God, and the soul is a piece of divinity. And, you can get into all sorts of religious and spiritual takes on that concept. But yeah, my book really covers that whole journey of like coming home to yourself, and in all its multitudes. And, which I feel like when you're kind of coming home to yourself, you are kind of coming home to God as well. So there is an interesting concept of tshuva there, which I never really, I never framed it as that, but it's definitely part of it. So yeah, I don't know if that helps. I mean, another thing is I've been through so many different Jewish communities and never felt at home in a lot of them, even though I've felt at home in Judaism and my relationship with God. And so there's been a lot of, rejecting one thing and looking for another, or finding the right fit religiously. That's been a journey in and of itself.
Mm. Thanks, Madison. I want to just flag one piece you were saying there around, teshuva, like this returning to yourself again and again and again. And you were saying like the Jewish calendar year, every year we kind of go through this kind of ritual spiral. And we're, I think, getting deeper and deeper into self and returning to that place of creation, of the divine that we all share as human beings. And it's different to think of it as returning to Shiva rather than just healing or doing trauma work. There's something inherent, I think, empowering and bit of a relief to say that we're returning to our authentic self, or we're just returning to that space of not having to prove anything or to get forgiveness or anything like that. Like we just return to that space of just being here now in a sense, but yeah, with that oneness that we all are.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's, it really depends on how you view the soul and the body, and, how in touch you are with then your community, right? And like seeing kind of the shared soul of a community, or of my dad just visited Israel with me, and his memory is really bad. He's 82, but he kept saying like, we're all the same soul. We're all the same soul. And he hasn't been to Israel in 50 years. And, he couldn't remember like one holy site from the other. Like I took him to a few places and it was like too much to remember the names of them and all of this. But he said like, it's almost like his soul has been here before. And, and that he was connecting I took him to, he went to the Western Wall. I took him to the kever, the grave site of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai at Meron, and he was davening in the by the kever, and he said like he connected soulfully with the other people in the minyan or whatever, and I think that was just so beautiful because this is a guy who ran away from Judaism, toward Hinduism, and now in his later in life is really reconnecting with it. I feel like my dad's going to become Baal Teshuva now, but yeah, I don't know. Just wanted to respond to what you said.
Beautiful. That's beautiful to see that he is returning to himself, to his traditions. And I guess you weren't able to squeeze that all into the book because it's happening kind of right now. But
it's like the epilogue. Yeah. I mean, yeah, he's very much, he has a very like Hasidish, a Hasidish soul. My dad is like really, I would call him like a Baal Shem Tov Chassid. Like he's like neo Hasidish. Like the Baal Shem Tov's whole thing was like, you can have a direct relationship with God. It doesn't have to be mediated by rabbis, and it doesn't have to come through really intense study. Like you can be a simple person and just have that direct, simple rapport with the creator. And that's my dad's shtick. And it's been that way my whole life. And so I think that's another reason why I've been really comfortable in kind of Hasidic spaces and been able to relate to them from that perspective.
Yeah. And to some extent, none of this needs to be inherently Jewish. These are really just processes of tuning in to inner reality and awareness. And I think, the religion itself of Judaism is pretty psychedelic, with fasting and dancing and praying and, singing and nigunim with songs with no words, feasting and pilgrimages and sacrifices. So it's pretty psychedelic stuff. And I think the land of Israel itself it's psychedelic being here. Like just the light seems different. The energy in my body just feels different here. It gives like this, I guess, that radical authenticity and intentionality. Like to be here, like there's no bullshit. Like you can't fake your way through life here. It's intense and it's raw. You've got to like work hard at it. But that's what we're here for. Like what else is there in life?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like my nervous system is more regulated here, especially in Sfat. I come here and my skin is better, my digestion is better. Like I just have more energy. I wake up early. Like I have a hard time waking up early in general, and I'm naturally waking up before my alarm. And I also recognize that I'm having this experience, and there's a lot of Israelis, who are from here who are get me the fuck out. The politics are insane. I'm moving to Portugal. That's a whole thing too. And so I'm not here to glorify it at all, but I just, what's undeniable, a feeling is undeniable, right? So when I'm here, I feel different in my body, and I think that's nothing to scoff at. But yeah, I mean, I always wonder, I'm like, why is it that I feel different here? And like, is it about this place, or is it just kind of about the spiritual energy, or is it a combination? So yeah, this is very psychedelic. The last thing I wanted to say on that point is, I always say that like Judaism is an expression of and a container for altered states. And so I think so much of the religion was developed around psychedelic experiences, right? Like receiving Torah at Mount Sinai, that was like one of the biggest, most significant collective psychedelic experiences in all of Jewish history, and therefore spawned the Jewish religion as we know it. And, other holidays too, like Sukkot, which is coming up, you're waving around plants in different directions, and it feels almost it's very tribal in a way. Like it feels like an indigenous, like Native American, tradition, and it's ours, and it's our native tradition. And, I feel like, what is psychedelic if not something that's connecting you to nature and connecting you to yourself? And the holidays have these opportunities that do connect you straight to nature and do enable you to explore yourself and feel into yourself and into time and into community and God in ways that could be considered altered or psychedelic, or however you want to define it. So yeah, the holidays kind of contain those psychedelic experiences and can even engender them.
And I'd love to hear some of your experiences around Jewish psychedelic use. So your own, yeah, but also the other folks that you've been meeting over the last 10 years or so. Mm-hmm. And your book is about, growing up in the psychedelic Jewish underground. So what's your sense of some of the collective experiences that Jewish people tend to have more of, or how does that get expressed when using psychedelics, and particularly using psychedelics as a group in different ways, more ceremonial or party or whatever, just recreation, whatever way it might be used? Are there any kind of themes you've come across, Madison, around kind of collective experiences that tend to be happening?
Yeah, I've definitely been party to a lot of them. There's a few examples. I'll go for two. One of them was a Rosh Hashanah a couple years ago, and we all were camping out on a nice property in upstate New York, and a lot of people took mushrooms, and it was sort of this anarchist service where, a lot of the people I was with were, came from the Hasidic background and could lead a Rosh Hashanah service easy. And so one of my friends, Meyer Labin, he comes from a Rebbeisha family, was doing that. And also a lot of us were on mushrooms. And at one point, when they blew shofar, it became like a shofar sound bath. And everyone started blowing shofar at once. I think it was 10 minutes of the shofar.
Wow.
And I was like, this is like insanity. Like, it was on mushrooms. Like, it was just, it's one thing, like, okay, you hear the shofar in the normal way. It's another thing when the sound just won't stop for 10 minutes because everyone is chiming in and starting and stopping and starting and stopping. And it's just a consistent sound. And I think, there's so much could be said about the significance of the shofar in general, right? About how why is it the main mitzvah on Rosh Hashanah? Like, even just hearing it itself, people say is like the whole is a kind of transformative experience and helps us in that process of tshuva and returning to ourselves and waking up, right? So that was one experience that I had. And I think part of the significance of it was that I was doing it in a community of people who I know and love and spend Shabbos with and see on a regular basis. And so the integration of that Rosh Hashanah just happens very naturally in just the time spent with that same group of people in other contexts. Another example, which I think is more quintessential, is the way that I've seen ayahuasca being used in Jewish communities, and specifically the Hasidic world. And again, the nigunam and other Jewish songs are used as the medicine music. The ceremony itself is sort of framed as a prayer. And, the whole experience of ayahuasca it's just like, they call it the medicine, but it's really just, I call it a lubricant for prayer. When people get up and dance, the way I've seen it happen, there's so much Torah and Hasidic thought around dance in particular, but especially with ayahuasca, your body can feel so uncomfortable. You're throwing up, you're nauseous, your heart's beating, like you're going through all sorts of sensations at once. And to get up and dance anyway is like such a spiritual thing. Rabbi Nachman talks about dance a lot, but it's really kind of breaking the ties of the spiritual gravity that would keep us down in sort of these depressive states, and to dance anyway and to claim the goodness that God is giving you, even when you're in a condition that is uncomfortable, right? And that's sort of this wrestling with God, is like God gives us these circumstances that we don't want to deal with, but he also gives us these gifts, and he also gives us legs to dance on, and we have to take the blessings that we have and really savor them, in the context of everything else. And so I experienced that with ayahuasca. I danced on it myself, and I observed Hasidim dancing across the room from me, these guys with their white socks and tzitzis and payas, and just the visual of that on the medicine was just, it changed my life in a lot of ways. And I've done it, multiple times. And again, the integration also comes in the community. And one time I did ayahuasca on Shabbos, and I was able to feel the energy of Shabbat, of the Shekhinah, the sort of female aspect of God, in a much stronger way. And so then Shabbos became my integration of the medicine experience, because every Shabbos I was able to sort of return to that feeling that I had, that ayahuasca woke me up to, but then I didn't need ayahuasca. And also hearing the same songs with the same group of people on Shabbos would just take me back there. And, the whole point of doing psychedelics is to get to a point where you don't have to do psychedelics anymore, where you're just living it. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question in a succinct way, but hopefully something there.
Yeah, no, I love that. All of that. Thank you. And that image that you described, I can picture it, with really Orthodox Jews kind of dancing and purging and being in that space. And it's an amazing thing. Like when I was just in America, I spent 11 years there. 11 years. But so many Jews in the East Coast, like in Lakewood and Muncie and Brooklyn and Manhattan, every weekend, every Shabbat, there's ayahuasca circles and mushroom ceremonies happening. It's incredible. Like really Orthodox Jews that normally, wouldn't eat at a certain restaurant if it doesn't have a kosher certificate, and they wouldn't, touch a person of the other gender. They're, sitting in ceremony and using psychedelics together. And it's an incredible thing. And I'm, I know that similar thing is happening over here as well in Israel. And there's a question of like, is it kosher? Not necessarily the plant itself, but more the intention behind it. Like, are we allowed to get this high so easily? Like, or should we only get there through, lifelong commitment to Torah and mitzvot and tefillah? Is this kind of quick fix allowed? And I don't honestly care that much about this question, because I don't think anyone can really say if our own consciousness and soul is kosher to experience it from within our own being. But I do think there is a question around intentionality, safety to some extent, and just how we do these things. But, we learn from doing, we learn from mistakes. And, sometimes we can have a very different experience than we had expected. Like we might not want to come back to being a Jew, and we do, or we might actually realize, God, I don't want to be an Orthodox Jew anymore. I want to be, I'm actually gay, or I want to be more secular, and I want to do these things with my life. So we can never tell what it's going to lead to, but hopefully it does lead to authenticity. And regardless if that makes us more Jewish or less Jewish, or more religious or less religious, if it can just lead us into that place of authenticity and just truth.
Yeah, I think
beautiful.
People get mixed up where they attribute all of the benefits of ayahuasca or any medicine or any avenue of to the thing itself. And I think Rabbi Nachman says that's a form of avodah zarah. So the kashrus issue is not so much like, okay, this plant is kosher. Like that's not the question, but it's really like, how are we using it in a way that we're acknowledging that it's just a vehicle rather than the thing in and of itself. Like psychedelics are not a destination. They are the vehicle that can take us to the destination. And they're not always going to work every time. And I think that's what Rabbi Nachman said, was like going to the same thing, that medicine, for instance, and expecting it to do the same exact thing every single time is not, that's like a not kosher way of thinking. Ultimately it's like, it puts us on a path to connecting with God. And when we are so spiritually aligned, that's when all of the magic kind of starts to happen. But it's not reliable that ayahuasca or any psychedelic or any other method will consistently act the same. So we really have to learn that's not the point.
Yeah. I love how much you're talking about Rabbi Nachman. When I first lived in Israel 15 years ago, I really got into his teachings, and there was a book called The Empty Chair. It's just a really little book. If anyone's interested, it's small, fits in your back pocket. Each page has got like, a little paragraph of a wise teaching. And I've had depression, for pretty much all my life and on and off. And that book really got me through some pretty intense depression when I was living in Jerusalem. And there's something about Rabbi Nachman's teachings. There's Likutei Moharan, which is, a real, massive book and very hard to fathom. And I'm not quite ready for that one yet. But there's some definite teachings there from Rabbi Nachman that fit really well with this, I think the psychedelic experience of connection and of, the challenge to be real and to move through whatever comes up and to meet it directly.
Yeah, Reb Nachman is psychedelic, I would say. I think learning Rabbi Nachman is a psychedelic experience. And I think a lot of the people who are followers of Rabbi Nachman have had their own kind of storied experiences in life and done a lot of psychedelics, or just haven't necessarily had an easy, straight path. And for that reason, they're drawn to Reb Nachman because his whole Torah is about, returning to yourself and harvesting happiness from the depths of sorrow and, really finding truth in the unlikeliest of places.
Mm. Yeah. And, here's an interesting idea around just mystical experiences. It's spoken a lot about now in psychedelic research. It's one of the, I think the assessment tools that really, has quite a lot of respect around the correlation between efficacy and intensity of psychedelic experiences. And I think, the mystical experience belongs to all human beings. I think it's almost a human right that we are able to and should work towards experiencing the mystical and having these almost, semi-prophetic realizations and enlightenment moments, and then learning how to integrate those and to live with those experiences. I'm curious, have you thought much about the mystical experiences of our ancestors, prophets, kings, prophetesses, some of the rabbis and the and rabbis in years gone by? Do you feel like they were tripping or literally were using any substances? And I know some folks have spoken about like the ketoret, the incense in the Beit HaMikdash, the temples that were in Jerusalem, some of the acacia wood that was used, some rabbis that would have something in their pipe that'd be smoking. Do you have any ideas or beliefs around this? I'm not sure where I hold, or the extent to which it's necessary to even have these beliefs in order to justify our using them from a religious perspective. Because I feel like I don't particularly think we need to have any kind of true kind of yichus line and lineage to prove that, our ancestors used psychedelics, therefore we can use our Jewish faith to use drugs nowadays. But nevertheless, I just wanted to see, where do you hold on those, I guess, intersecting questions?
Yeah, I mean, I think, people like to say, the burning bush was acacia. The tribe, the Israelite tribe learned acacia extraction technology from the Egyptians, and acacia is a DMT containing plant or bush or whatever that is native to the Middle East. And so it's not far-fetched to assume or to just conjecture that the tribe was using acacia in some way, and having some sort of DMT experience. Whether that matters is another story. I spoke to Rick Strassman, who's a DMT researcher, and he said, so what? Like, not every Joe Schmo who takes acacia is going to be, or takes DMT or whatever, is going to become a prophet. So I think, yes, mystical experience is universal. I think we all have an innate capacity to experience the divine, but the question is, does it matter? And so what? And what are you doing with it afterward? And how are you bringing it down into the material world and really living according to that experience? So, there's other instances too, aside from acacia, or aside from the burning bush. They said that the ketoret, the incense in the temple, was burned on acacia wood. So, there's something to that. They found cannabis resins. I no doubt. I think it's the most natural thing in humanity to alter your consciousness with the available plants. That's not any, and even our relationship with wine. Wine is the ultimate obvious plant medicine in Judaism, and we have whole rituals around wine, and ceremony is around the cups, how many cups of wine, and when to drink it, and blessing it, and that's we talk about like drinking cups of whatever, and we think about ayahuasca, but Pesach, for instance, is so obvious, right? Or Tu B'Shvat. And also people say that Baal Shem Tov smoked from a pipe, and who knows what was in the pipe. And I read somewhere that in Cannabis Hasidus by Yosef Needleman, that it contained cannabis resin. And so again, that was like a legend, so to speak. Someone found the pipe and tested it. So who knows? But I don't think it matters. I think it's really a matter of just like, how connected are you, and how much are you living that truth and sharing it with others, and how much does your way of being simply reflect that.
Beautiful. Thanks for that nuanced answer, Madison. A couple more questions if we can squeeze it in there. And I've got a question around the Jewish Psychedelic Summit of last year that was online, and then the meetup, the workshop that happened in Denver at the MAPS conference a couple months back. So I wasn't at either, missed out on two big ones there, but hey, I'm going to the Tel Aviv conference in December, so I'm kind of looking forward to that one. Can you just talk a wee bit about, what was the vision behind those two events, and to what extent you were part of that kind of vision coming together? And then what was the experience like being in that gathering of Jewish people talking about these topics, and experiencing some kind of rituals together as well? How was that for you, and potentially for other folks that were there?
Yeah, so I co-founded the Jewish Psychedelic Summit with Natalie Ginsburg, who's been working at MAPS for many years in policy, and Rabbi Zach Kamenetz, who originally came to psychedelics, I'd say, through the Johns Hopkins trials on religious professionals, giving psilocybin to rabbis and priests and whatever, and he was particularly inspired, and I interviewed him about it. And anyways, he's now founded a nonprofit for Jewish psychedelic support called Shefa. But I think the Jewish Psychedelic Summit in general was really meant to both reflect what's happening and give it like a more crystallized identity. And also, it was already happening and been happening, maybe increasingly in the last couple of years or last 10 years, but also since the 60s with Reb Zalman, and, even before that, right? Like really just giving a more recognition to these aspects of Judaism and the movement that's on the ground. So there's that piece. And then also like meeting a demand and meeting a need. I think so many people want to connect to what is psychedelic Judaism, and they don't even know where to start or who to meet or how to practice it. And so JPS really, offers that educational platform and container for community.
And how did it feel for you just being there, like in person, particularly in Denver? What was it like after, COVID and doing all the online stuff, to be in such a big kind of gathering?
Yeah, it was beautiful. I mean, I live this, like everyone I'm close with is, I would call a psychedelic Jew, whether they know it or not. And, the way I personally spend Shabbos, and the people I'm hanging out with, a lot of them coming from Hasidic backgrounds, or having had their own psychedelic experiences, like it really is, it informs the spaces that I'm lucky enough to just call home in my community. And so being at Denver was interesting, because I was then meeting people who are outside my immediate community who are looking to connect with this too. And how do they practice? How are they looking to practice? Like, what does it look like? There's so many different types of Jews in the world in general. And I would say there's a lot of different types of psychedelic Jews. So it was just like, I would say like sociologically fascinating. And I met some people who really are just special souls and so learned and have so much to offer, and, starting really great conversations. I was lucky enough also to connect with a lot of the folks from the Israeli-Palestinian ayahuasca study that's been happening, or that happened in Spain. And, seeing like, okay, psychedelic Judaism is cool. Like, now what do you do with it? Right? Like how is it making the world a better place? Like what are the action items? And initiatives that come out of this type of consciousness. And so they talk about sacred activism, for instance, and I think that's really an interesting, like, what's next kind of topic.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really important to put the emphasis on, like, so what, like, big deal, what are you going to do with it? And I think, looking at Israel, there's a couple of massive issues right now around, Israelis, Palestinians, and also, Orthodox, secular, right wing, left wing, how to have those conversations. And I guess the polarization that we're all experiencing around the world. Yeah, we're feeling it here in Israel and in the Jewish community. And it's so easy to put someone into a bubble and put ourselves into a bubble and feel like this is who I am. And I feel like psychedelics help us just deconstruct that, or unwillingly, it just kind of melts away this idea of who I thought I was. And then we're left with, okay, so let's pick up those pieces and recreate and see, maybe I don't need to be anything or anyone in particular, but just being a vehicle and to really connect with some of the issues that need to be dealt with.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so we're at time, Madison. I want to give you just a quick chance just to tell folks anything else that you haven't got to mention yet, and also, where they can find out more about you.
Yeah, what else have I not gotten to mention yet? I just want to say, read the book. I think it'll fill in a lot of. I referenced it a lot, but I said it way more gracefully in writing after 20 edits. So it's called Exile Ecstasy, growing up with Ram Dass and coming of age in the psychedelic Jewish underground, the Jewish Psychedelic Underground. And you can order it on Amazon. If you go to, my social media, you'll find the link to it. You can follow me on Instagram at Madison Margolin, Facebook, Madison Margolin, Twitter, Margolin Madison. That's the only one that's a little bit different. And just generally speaking, I just want to encourage everybody to, like, really see, like, how they can personalize this content, right? And, like, what does it mean to have a psychedelic experience? What does it mean to nourish your own soul? And then to, like, really embody it in I feel like a psychedelic experience, so much of that is the embodiment of the soul, right? Like your soul's experience in a body, and just becoming, like, highly privy to that fact and that experience. And so, for me, it's not enough to just learn about it and read about it and talk about it, but, like, how am I living it and feeling it on a daily basis? And I think that's, being in the, the 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is really an opportunity to just say, like, how are we walking in the world, and how are we walking with God? I think that's literally what halacha means, actually, technically. And I don't, whether you're a halachic Jew or not, it's still a question of how is spirituality and psychedelic experience informing your day-to-day living. So, food for thought.
Thank you, Madison. Yeah, and just briefly, doing a bit of research about you, the word service came up a lot in the articles I was reading that you've authored or about things that you've said. So there's that idea of, there's that service, like the avodah, like the service of the priests in the high temple in Jerusalem, and just service of, like, halacha, like walking with God. Thank you for your service to Yisrael and to humanity. And it's awesome to see the path that you've taken. And the book sounds great. I'm going to order my copy. I can't wait to read it, and I can't wait to see you soon in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv for the conference in December, and coming up to Tzfat. So, thanks so much for everything, Madison. Great having you on the show.
So much, and thank you for all your service, things that you do for the community, both psychedelic and Jewish, and the world.
Amen. All right, thanks for listening, everyone. Have a lovely day. God bless. Thank you for listening. There you go. Wonderful conversation with Madison. I had so much more that I would love to have talked about, just explored, just the idea of religion and what relevance that has, what it actually is, and how it intersects with just our personal connection with the divine, with our soul, with our body, with our wisdom. And then, subjects of race, ethnicity, and trauma, and our intergenerational inheritance. There's so much there. So definitely on the beginning of this one. And I also want to go deep into more Kabbalistic and Hasidic teachings and kind of meditation, mindfulness, divine practices. So that's the next course I'd love to build. But for now, the first course, if you want to check it out, it's called Navigating Psychedelics, Jewish Informed Perspectives, and it's on the psychedelicEducationCenter.com. All right. Thank you again for listening. Really means the world to us. And we'll see you next time. God bless everybody.